You can clean a building perfectly, send an invoice for $10,000, and still run out of cash before that invoice ever gets paid. The piece that breaks most new owners in this trade has almost nothing to do with how well anyone cleans. It's timing. A dollar you earned and a dollar sitting in your account, those are two completely different things, separated by a gap most people never think to measure until they're standing inside it. Picture a bucket of water, passed hand to hand down a long line of people, moving towards someone who needs it right now to put out a fire. Every person holding that bucket takes a sip before passing it along, and the bucket itself takes real time to travel the line. By the time it reaches the person who actually needs the water, less of it is left, and it arrived late. That's the shape of money in this business, at every layer, from your very first client all the way up to whoever eventually buys your company. Hold that image. You'll need it again. There are at least 3 real doors into this trade, and they lead to wildly different economics, even though the underlying activity barely changes. Making something clean. Standard janitorial and residential cleaning is the cheapest door, a few $100s for basic supplies, maybe a couple thousand for a proper setup. Pressure washing is a close second, equipment running from around $1,000 to $5,000. Job prices commonly landing between $150 and $400. And auto detailing opens even wider. A mobile setup can start under $2,000. A single high-end ceramic coating job can bill $600 to $3,000. And at the far end of that same underlying trade sits a full tunnel car wash, costing $5 million to $8.5 million to build. 3 doors, 1 trade, and a spread from a few $100s to 9 figures, depending on which one you walk through. Getting through any of those doors is the easy part. Getting your first real client is where most people actually stall. On the residential side, the path is short: a listing on a booking platform, a handful of reviews, a referral from a real estate agent handling a move-out. On the commercial side, the path runs through property managers, facility firms that subcontract cleaning for buildings they operate, government bidding portals, old-fashioned walkthroughs where you price the job on the spot. And here's the part that actually matters. Those 2 paths cost wildly different amounts to walk. A residential client is cheap and fast to land and pays somewhere around $150 to $300 a visit. A commercial account takes longer, often months of proposals and walkthroughs. But a single recurring commercial visit can run $500 to $5,000 or more, repeating for a year or 2 straight. One path is a fast trickle, the other is a slow river, and it's the one that actually fills the bucket. That river moves slower than your bills do, and this is where the bucket brigade actually starts hurting you. A commercial client rarely pays the moment you finish the job. 30 days is common, 60 is not rare. Meanwhile, your crew expects to be paid every 2 weeks. Your fuel and supplies are due now, and your insurance renews on its own calendar with zero regard for your invoices. Run the simple version: $10,000 billed this month. Roughly half of that already gone to payroll and its hidden add-ons before the client has even opened your invoice. And the actual cash covering that payroll had to come from somewhere else. Usually a reserve you built up earlier, or a loan you're paying interest on right now. A business can look completely healthy on a profit and loss statement and still miss a payroll run, purely because of timing. The wage on a paycheck is only the visible layer of what an employee actually costs you. Underneath it sits payroll tax, roughly 8 to 10 cents on every dollar of wage. Workers' compensation insurance that can cost under 2 cents on the dollar in a cheap state and climb toward 8 cents in an expensive one, and paid time off, if you offer any. Stack all of that on the wage, and the true hourly cost of one worker commonly runs 15 to 25% above the number on their paycheck. There's a story that gets told a lot in the pressure washing trade. An operator priced his jobs assuming his own cost was $30 an hour. Then he actually tracked every expense for 6 months. His real cost was $68 an hour. He'd been pricing off the tip of the iceberg the whole time, and the business almost didn't survive finding out. Walk one single contract all the way through, and you can see exactly where the money actually lands. A commercial account, paying you $10,000 a month, starts losing pieces immediately. Roughly $4,800 to loaded labor, once every payroll tax and insurance cost is stacked on the wage. Several $100s to supplies and equipment wear. Several hundred more to liability coverage and bonding. And if you're operating under a franchise, another few $100 to $700 gone as royalty before you've covered a minute of your own management time. What survives all of that, commonly somewhere around $3,000 to $4,000 a month, on a contract this size, is the actual profit. Multiply that by 12, then multiply the yearly number by whichever multiple matches your scale. 2 to 4 times for a single owner. 7 to 12 times for a national platform. And you've just watched the same $10,000 a month turn into a company worth anywhere from roughly $90,000 to well over $400,000, depending entirely on which rung of the ladder happens to be holding that one contract. Keeping a crew in place long enough to matter is its own separate fight. Commercial cleaning is commonly cited as having one of the highest turnover rates of any service trade. Industry estimates run around 200% a year, meaning a typical company effectively replaces its entire workforce twice over, in 12 months. Though the federal data underneath that widely repeated figure is messier and shows something closer to 1 seat in 7 turning over annually, depending how it's measured. Either way, every single departure costs something real, commonly $1,000 to $5,000 in direct recruiting, screening, and training expense per replacement. And for a 100-person cleaning company running at the higher turnover estimate, that adds up to $200,000 to $500,000 a year, just to keep the roster full. A single no-show on a scheduled job costs somewhere around $150 to $300, once you count the scrambling, the overtime for whoever covers it, and the manager's time spent finding someone at all. Watch how that single missed shift actually cascades if you follow it all the way to the end. One cleaner doesn't show up. The client notices, calls to complain. A manager scrambles to send a replacement, usually at overtime pay, which quietly erodes that job's margin down to almost nothing. The client, still annoyed, asks for a discount on next month's invoice to smooth things over, and a negative review goes up online before that discount conversation even finishes. Months later, when the contract comes up for renewal, that one missed shift is part of the reason it doesn't get renewed. A single no-show, chased all the way to its real end, can cost you an entire contract, worth far more than the couple $100 it looked like on the day it happened. All of that turnover chaos connects directly to a much bigger question, the one that actually decides what your business is worth the day you try to sell it. Could your business keep running profitably for 90 straight days if you personally vanished? No phone, no email, no one able to reach you. For most owners, the honest answer is no, and buyers treat that answer as the single biggest factor in what they're willing to pay. A business that can't survive 90 days without its owner gets priced 1 to 2 full turns of profit, lower than a comparable business that can. Because the buyer isn't purchasing your company at that point. They're purchasing your job. And jobs aren't transferable. Real listings in this exact industry show what the alternative looks like. Cleaning companies built around crew leaders with over a decade of tenure who run daily operations without the owner. Hundreds of recurring appointments billed automatically through cards kept on file, and an owner who spends 10 to 15 hours a week on the whole operation. The turnover war you're fighting every month and the 90-day test a buyer will eventually run on you are the exact same fight, just measured on 2 different timelines. What you're actually selling underneath the cleaning itself is consistency. A building rarely fires a cleaning company because the price crept up a little. It fires the company because a corner went uncleaned twice in a row, because a complaint sat unanswered, because the crew changed 3 times in 2 months and no one explained why. Around half of all residential clients will leave after a single bad visit, and trust consistently outranks price as the reason a household picks one cleaner over another in the first place. The mop and the chemicals are nearly identical from one company to the next. What actually gets bought and renewed and referred is the promise that tomorrow looks exactly like yesterday. Selling this business and operating it are really 2 separate businesses wearing the same name. Strong sales, paired with weak operations, fills your calendar with contracts you can't actually service well, and you lose them almost as fast as you win them. Strong operations paired with weak sales leaves a trained, capable crew sitting on unused capacity. A quieter way of losing the exact same money. The operators who actually compound over years are the rare ones running both engines at once. Some clients also deserve far more caution than others. A single account, responsible for more than roughly 10 to 15% of your total revenue, is widely treated as a warning sign in this exact segment of the services world. And once one client crosses about 20%, buyers routinely apply a full 1 to 2 turns of profit as a discount on the whole company. because losing that one relationship would gut the business overnight. A company earning $5 million from 200 spread out clients is often a safer, more valuable business than one earning $7 million from 3. Cleaning hours themselves carry wildly different value. And this is where the different doors from earlier start to matter again. Standard janitorial work is labor-heavy, thin margin, because you're mostly reselling hours at a modest markup. Pressure washing runs meaningfully richer, commonly 45 to 65% operating margin, because the chemical cost sits under 10% of the job price, and the rest is time and equipment you already own. Auto detailing runs richer still, on its premium end. A standard wash and detail might clear 50 to 80%, while a ceramic coating job, priced in the hundreds to low thousands of dollars, can clear 75 to 85%, because you're really selling skill and a chemical finish rather than raw scrubbing time. Specialty verticals inside standard commercial cleaning, healthcare facilities, and newer categories like the clean rooms inside large data centers command premium pricing for the same underlying reason. Fewer people can do the work correctly, so the work is worth more per hour. With a service this easy to copy, the real question is what actually stops a competitor from doing exactly what you do, for less. It's rarely the equipment. Anyone can buy the same pressure washer, the same floor buffer you own. What holds a client relationship in place is density. A crew that already knows the building and the client's specific preferences. A recruiting pipeline that keeps that crew intact instead of losing it to turnover. And a signed multi-year contract that makes switching genuinely inconvenient rather than just theoretically possible. None of that shows up in a brochure. All of it shows up in whether a client stays 5 years or 5 months. Somewhere outside all of this sits a risk that has nothing to do with how well you run any of it. A meaningful share of the people who physically clean buildings in this country are immigrants. In janitorial and cleaning work specifically, the national estimate runs past 500,000 people. Starting in 2025 and continuing into 2026, federal worksite immigration enforcement expanded sharply across the country. For an operator with immigrant staff, that turned into a real, sudden operating risk, entire crews vanishing overnight, occasionally including workers legally authorized to be there, detained before anyone confirmed their status. Picture a support beam pulled out of a structure that was never designed to notice the beam was load-bearing until the exact moment it's gone. That's what a sudden crew departure does to a night's cleaning schedule you already promised the client. The operators who kept standing through a shock like that tended to share one habit. Their client book was already spread across several different industries. So a shock hitting one segment never took down the whole business at once. Here's the question that makes the biggest numbers in this trade actually make sense. If you can start a version of this business for a few $100s, why would anyone ever pay millions of dollars for one that already exists? The honest answer is that a buyer isn't purchasing mops. A buyer is purchasing time, and time compounds into a specific set of things. A client roster that took years to build, one contract at a time, a crew that already knows how to do the work without daily supervision, a reputation that survived enough 5-star reviews and enough bad days to earn real trust, and a set of contracts legally transferable to a new owner the moment the sale closes. A single-owner shop with no management layer typically sells for 2 to 4 times its yearly profit. A company with a real manager running daily operations sells for 4 to 6 times. A larger regional operation with route density and a diversified client base sells for 5 to 8 times. A national platform built from dozens of smaller companies stitched together trades for 7 to 12 times. The cleaning underneath never changes across that whole ladder. Only the ownership wrapper around it does. And the wrapper is exactly what a buyer is actually paying for. Follow the bucket brigade all the way up that ladder, and you'll find it never actually stops at your own franchise fee or your own royalty payment. A worker gets paid for the hour worked. The company employing that worker takes its own cut for managing the schedule and carrying the insurance. A franchise or platform sitting above that company takes a royalty, whether that specific location thrives or struggles. A broker or a property management firm handling the relationship with the building owner often takes its own fee for the introduction. And a private equity fund, sitting above a whole platform of companies like yours, commonly collects an annual management fee, frequently around 2% of committed capital, regardless of whether any individual platform underneath it actually performs, on top of a much larger share of the profit if it does. 5 separate hands can touch the same bucket of money before it ever reaches the building owner who originally paid for a clean floor. And every single hand along that chain gets paid on a schedule that has nothing to do with your own. Buying 10 small companies and calling the result a platform doesn't automatically create the savings a spreadsheet promises. Someone still has to merge 10 different scheduling systems into one. Unify 10 separate payroll processes. Convince employees who spent years loyal to a small local owner to stay loyal to a distant one instead. Skip that work, and the economies of scale everyone talked about during the acquisition stay trapped on a spreadsheet, permanently disconnected from the bank account. Here's what it actually looks like when the bucket brigade wins, and the person at the bottom loses. In a real lawsuit against one of the country's largest commercial cleaning franchise brands, 2 named plaintiffs described paying initial franchise fees of $14,400 and $23,400. Each was promised a guaranteed income. One at $8,000 a month, the other at $7,000. One ended up earning less than $3,000 a month. The other earned less than $4,000. Before either of them ever saw a paycheck, the middleman managing them deducted a management fee and a marketing fee off the top, and separately passed a slice of every franchise fee collected further up toward the parent company. When a client complaint showed up, sometimes manufactured rather than genuine, according to the underlying allegations, the account tied to that complaint could simply be reassigned to a different worker entirely. The person actually cleaning the building changed. The toll kept collecting exactly the same. A federal judge, later ruling on that parent company's own structure, wrote the actual mechanism out plainly. Its revenue depended on how much work the people underneath it performed, never on whether any individual one of them actually succeeded. If you had signed that identical agreement, at that identical fee, the exact same mechanism would have worked against you. This isn't a quirk that belongs to one brand, in one corner of the cleaning industry. A completely unrelated franchise system, the sandwich chain Quiznos, ran on almost the identical mechanism, at a much larger scale. Quiznos required every one of its franchisees to buy food and supplies exclusively from a company-affiliated distributor at prices that internal audits and multiple lawsuits later put at 10 to 30% above the open market. Roughly 10,000 franchisees eventually joined a single class action over it, settled in 2010, for around $206 million, with total settlements across every related lawsuit topping $200 million beyond that. The chain shrank from more than 5,000 locations at its peak to under 200 and filed for bankruptcy in 2014. You don't need to buy into cleaning specifically to run into this mechanism. You only need to buy into any structure built the same way. Zoom all the way out, and this entire business is really a ladder with 6 rungs. And almost everyone in this trade is standing on one of them right now, whether they realize it or not. On the first rung, you sell your own labor by the hour. On the second, you sell other people's labor and keep the spread. On the third, you own the recurring contracts themselves, worth structurally more than the labor underneath them. On the fourth, you own a whole geographic network of those contracts, dense enough that adding one more building barely costs you anything extra. On the fifth, you start acquiring other people's networks instead of building your own from scratch. And on the sixth, someone above you buys the entire platform. And the bucket brigade you spent years building starts paying someone else first. So is owning a piece of this actually a good trade, dollar for dollar? The honest answer depends entirely on which rung you're standing on, and on one more nuance worth being precise about. This trade is genuinely defensive against the downturn, which is a narrower claim than being immune to one. A hospital doesn't stop needing its floors cleaned because the broader economy slows down, and multi-year facility contracts don't cancel themselves overnight. But the 2008 to 2009 downturn is the honest counterexample. Because a real share of commercial cleaning demand is tied to occupied office space, growth in this trade did slow, when vacancies rose and new construction stalled. Defensive means falling less than everything else around it, during a bad year. And that's a real durable advantage, on its own. The bucket still reaches the fire eventually, it just never arrives full, and it never arrives on time.